Welcome back to the About Our Father's Business podcast. Join me in welcoming Tim Barnett. He's going to share his extremely powerful story of how he came to Christ and the National Sales Director for Donaldson. Tim Barnett, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're going to get straight into it. How did you come to your faith in Christ?
Well, so my father was in the ministry my entire life. So he was a worship leader and a seniors pastor, pretty much did everything but preach. And so we were always involved in church. But at the age of 8 in Woodward, Oklahoma, I was sitting in a service. We had an evangelist, a special speaker come in, and he was one of those old-fashioned fire and brimstone preachers. I still remember it. And he spoke on hell. And that's something you really don't hear much anymore in churches. But he laid it out there that if you died without Christ, without a relationship with Jesus, that's where you're going. And, he laid out the alternative is like, you want to be in heaven with Jesus, or you be without Jesus and in hell? And I just kind of remember, I don't remember the entire thing, but I remember just being completely moved and actually a little fearful. And as an 8-year-old, so when there was an altar call, I went forward, and I remember just kind of weeping there. And my mother, who happens to be on the organ, she got up off the organ, stopped playing, and come and met with me and led me to the Lord right there. And I don't know if you've met a lot of people or individuals that have been part of a family that's been on staff at church or a preacher's kid. But we have different struggles. And one of the struggles that I remember having was just my security, my salvation security, because I hadn't lived a huge life of sin, in debauchery and drugs and, all this kind of stuff. I didn't ever have the opportunity to do that. I was saved young. And so you don't see that drastic change as you would maybe somebody that gets saved later on in life. And so as a kid, you kind of question, well, was I sincere? Did I really mean it? Am I really saved? And so you kind of go through this process until when I became a teenager, I finally just kind of put that to rest. It's like, if I'm really worried about it, I think I'm okay, And so your faith evolves over time, it matures. And so that's been a little bit of the journey there.
Dive a little deeper into what it was like to be a preacher's kid.
Well, you're always under the microscope. It's tough. It is. You have to be the perfect child. And, anytime you might step out of line, everybody knows it, people are judgy. Yeah. So that's the downside of it. The other side of it is you get positive attention too. But I always said that there are many people who say, well, why haven't you gone to the ministry? And well, first of all, I'm not called to be in full-time ministry. Some things have changed recently that kind of makes me more involved. But the other side of it is I've kind of seen the ugly side of ministry, and it's the people side. It's the messy side. Yeah. And it's hard. That's a hard job. And you do have to be called to just survive, I think.
Do you have any, like for you, what does it mean to be called? Like, how do you know that?
Yeah, I think like anything, when God calls you to do something, I don't know what your experience has been, but I have to do it. I mean, I'm just so moved toward doing that I really have no other options. Now I have free will always. Yeah. I can push the Holy Spirit down. But I think if you're called to do it, a pastor friend of mine once said that if you can do anything else, then you probably should. Yeah. I mean, pastors, many of them have told me, it's like, I can't do anything else. I just can't. And so I thought that's an interesting perspective.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, is if you can't do anything else, then you should be doing it.
What's the opposite of that, right? It's like, Yeah, I can't. Yeah, I have to be in the ministry. I mean, I can't do anything else.
Yeah.
I must do that.
So you didn't have that feeling for ministry?
Not full time. I think there's been opportunities for me to step in and preach if a pastor's gone on vacation, that kind of thing. And I really always really enjoy that. It's God always reaches me, and the message is always directed toward me. So I'm kind of usually emotionally a mess by the end of it. I'm exhausted. It takes me a long time to put a great message together. Sometimes spending 30 or 40 hours doing it. So I still don't think I'm called, but I am definitely, committed to ministry. I'm an elder in the church that I attend now. We started a new church a year and a half ago. And that's a kind of a whole different story, but it's been quite a journey, and just partnering with a handful of guys to start a new church and then shepherd the church. I am now in ministry, just not full time. But it's been a great experience.
And I think I have to remind myself that not everybody in the church, not all the pastors are going to be behind the pulpit.
It's true. Yep.
A lot of them are just discipling people and even doing the administrative things, the leadership side, behind the scenes. Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So how did you become the America's sales director at Donaldson, which is a pretty big company? It's
a great company. I love being part of it. Well, I think probably have to back up to maybe the very beginning.
Sure.
Because like everybody, we kind of have this journey of how did we get here into the occupation that we have today? And I've had people ask me this, and it's, sometimes it comes down to just one or two decisions, and it sets your course. And I'm just like that as well. I had a real interest in law enforcement at one point, and actually taking all the tests for the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. And I had 2 years of college, and I didn't think I really wanted to go any further. And I thought, well, law enforcement looks like that would be something I'd be interested in. And so I took all the tests, and the only thing I needed was the agility test, and I think I was probably going to be in. And I get a call out of the blue from a friend of mine that was leaving a company, and he said, "Hey, would you want to be an office manager for this company? And this is what we do: we sell mining equipment." I said, "Sell mining equipment in Kansas City?" He goes, "Yeah." He said, "Why don't you come and meet the owner?" And I'm leaving. In fact, this individual was leaving to go into the ministry. Isn't that funny? And so he knew that I was looking for something, and he thought maybe I'd be good at it. So I went and met with the owner, and he basically hired me on the spot. Now, I was in my early 20s at the time. And it wasn't a huge company, but it had been around 40 years. It was a nice business. It had a shop and a metal fabrication shop, and they had a front office and sales team. And so they said, "Look, we just come in and run the front office." And it's like, okay, I can do that, I think. And so, that's kind of what it started. I was going to law, now I'm in business. Well, it just so after a few months, the sales team was gone one day, and I was in my office, and the phone rang, and it was a customer wanting a piece of equipment. So I had been listening and picked up enough to where I could explain to him what we had in inventory, what it would do, what the pricing was, and I ended up selling it. So it was my first thing I ever sold, and I remember how just exciting that was. And I just couldn't believe it. And they came, picked it up. We loaded it on a truck. It shipped off to them. And then the owner came in and plopped down $200 cash on my desk. And I said, "What's that for?" He said, "Well, that's your commission." "Commission? You mean actually get paid for doing that?" He goes, "Yeah." And I remember just like goosebumps on my arm. I was so excited. He walked out of my office. I called my wife. I said, "You won't believe what just happened. I just earned $200 on selling this." And I'm like crying. I'm so excited. I'll never forget the feeling. And I thought, you know what? I'm gonna do more of this. So I started selling more of the equipment. And anyway, after a year, I had pretty much taken over the entire office. I started hiring other people to come and do outbound calling and inbound, sales. And anyway, so they changed my title from office manager to general manager. And so I stayed there for 10 years. And as a early 20s guy, I was now the general manager of this company, selling humongous equipment, shipping it all over the country. I even got to travel to Europe, and we started importing new products. It was just an incredible experience. And I look back on it, and I think, I often wonder, how did that happen? But one of the things that I think really impacted me is I was a young person at a company where I was literally the youngest person. All the people that I was managing were in their 30s, 40s, 50s, out in the shop, in the front office, and until I started hiring younger people in the sales roles. But I just couldn't go out there and just start bossing them around. I mean, that wouldn't have gone over very well at all. So I had to learn how to be more participatory, work as a team, invite them into the conversation. Hey, this is our problem. What are your thoughts on this? I had to do it out of necessity. And instead of fighting me, they worked with me. And so there were some lessons learned there, and I think it really fed into my leadership style that I have today.
So what was going on in your mind when you first had your heart set on becoming a police officer?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you had this opportunity to work in an office.
Yeah, well,
and you're like, I'll take that.
Well, it's because the starting pay was more than the police officer pay. And so it was more of like, hey, I just got to make a living.
Yeah. And you were married at the time, so I get that.
Yeah. We got married young. We were 20. And so, I was just looking to try to get ahead a little bit.
Why did you want to become a police officer?
It sounded exciting. And of course, the way I was raised, there's like a right and wrong.
Sure.
And you want to be the good guy and help enforce that and catch the bad guys. And it just sounded exciting to a young guy.
So this was a family friend who invited you to work?
It was a friend that was leaving, and he invited me into interview with the owner of the company.
Got it. Why do you think he invited you?
I don't know. I mean, I suppose he knew that I was looking for something.
You were obviously responsible.
Yeah.
And because for him to find his replacement, that's his neck on the line.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I really never thought about
that. He's not gonna choose some person who's just living life, by the second.
Right. Yeah. No.
You obviously were organized and you had your stuff together.
Yeah, I was married, had a home, couple cars. I mean, even I was already, That.
What were you doing then? What were you working? What was your job then? You weren't a police officer.
No, I was a law clerk. That was my college job.
Wow. So then you went from law clerk to office manager and then general manager within a pretty short amount of time. And you were still young at that time.
Yeah. That's right.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
And so your question was, how did I get to be the sales director, America's sales director for Donaldson? So that was the first 10 years. And I think the end of that time period, I had realized that the company needed to do some major investments. And I laid out a growth strategy for the company to the owners, told them how much the investment was going to be. And that I showed them also that if we didn't change, we were the company was going to suffer. And I remember walking in and talking to the two owners, the president and the vice president of the company. And I gave my presentation, and they looked at me and they said, "Tim, we're very satisfied with what we have. Keep doing what you're doing." And something just kind of died in me at that point. I'd already gotten my MBA at Rockhurst University by that time. I got that during these 10 years. And so I was really hungry and ready to just do something big and just change the world, And so this was my opportunity to do that. So when I presented that to them and they responded that way, I just thought, oh no, I have to leave this place now. And they were like family to me. I mean, they took great care of me. I loved them, and they just like I said, in my early 20s, they literally handed me the checkbook and the keys, gave me $100,000 signing authority for a guy in his early 20s and said, just make us money. And they just let me go for 10 years.
Did you say $100,000 signing bonus?
Yeah. No, signing authority.
Authority.
Yeah, if I said bonus,
sorry, I missed that.
If I said bonus, no,
like,
signing authority at the bank.
How do I get there?
Yeah, really. Yeah, no, and so the trust was there. It was a great place for that time.
Wow.
And so when they said that, I thought, oh my goodness. So I left and started looking for my next place. Unfortunately, 3.5 years later, they went out of business.
Oh my!
And so it was almost prophetic.
Yeah.
So anyway, lots of lessons learned there.
Why didn't you buy it? Did you think about that?
Oh man, you got to understand this capital equipment is, very expensive.
Yeah.
Millions and millions of dollars with inventory. There's no way I could have done that. Yeah. But anyway, so as we kind of, marched through the journey, I ran, let's see here. First thing I did, trying to get the timeline right. I moved to a company that I was a sales and product manager for them for a while. I ran a trucking company as the general manager. I've run two manufacturing companies as general manager. Ran an industrial supply company. So there's a variety there. But how I got to Donaldson was that I had been running a factory for about 4 years, and there were some changes that were made, and somebody from the corporate office, vice president of HR, comes to my office and says, Tim, we appreciate what you've been doing for the last 4 years, but we're going to kind of do things differently here, and we're going to need you to get your stuff and leave. And I like,
is that how they said it to you?
Well, in so many words, yeah. It's like, hey, so after 4 years, it was a great experience there. I was unemployed for the first time in my life. I couldn't believe it. An MBA, 25 years of management experience. I don't know the timeline now.
So that was a surprise for you.
It was a surprise. I kind of saw things happening around me, so I kind of started getting this feeling that there's something weird going on here, and then it happened. But I went into a 6-month period of unemployment, job transition. That's how you define that, and that was a first-time experience for me, and it wrecked me. When I walked out the door, I said, "No problem. I've got the experience, the education, track record. I'm going to have a job next week." Didn't have a job next week. Those kind of jobs they're just not on every corner. And you have to have a network of people to kind of help you get into those roles. I didn't have a network. I just had my head down working, and I hadn't built a network beyond, the company I was working for. So that was a real experience. And that is when I learned that a lot of my identity was wrapped up into what I did. There was a lot of pride there too, and I didn't realize that. I liked being the man. I liked walking out to my factory floor and people waving to me and all that. I enjoyed that. I just being transparent.
Sure.
And I felt like I was doing a great job and all that. So when that happened, it's like, what's happening to me? And this is not fair. And so then started the process of building out my network. But during that 6 months, I really had kind of a crisis of faith. I felt like God had abandoned me. My wife has always stayed at home, been a stay-at-home mom. I had kids in private school. I had a mortgage. Everything keeps going. It doesn't matter if you don't have a job or not. And so that was a really scary time for me. And I was doing everything I possibly could to find my next opportunity. And it just seemed like God was just closing doors right and left. And I remember just crying out to him, begging him. At some point it's like, and I remember him, and I remember a point, I was out on the back patio praying. And it was one of those prayers where you're begging. And at this point, I'm upset. I'm mad. I'm mad at God. And I remember just having, it wasn't an audible voice, but I feel like God just spoke to me and said, if I don't save you out of this situation, are you still going to love me? Are you still going to trust me? It's been years ago, and I'm still getting emotional about it because I still remember it like yesterday. And it was at that point I had to say, yes, I will still love you. I will still trust you. So that's what I wanted to hear. And it was the next day. Boom. I had an opportunity, got the call, and it was incredible. I think God he had to work on me for 6 months. And it changed the way that I view God and my relationship with him. And it was for the better, but it was hard. It was a really, really hard time. It's been decades, and it still moves me. Anyway, so kind of fast forward a little bit, landed another job with another manufacturing company out here in Johnson County. And one of my ultimate goals since I started in business, got my MBA, is I wanted to be a CEO of a company. $20 million. I'll take a $20 million company. I just want to be CEO, 20 to 50. Let's just say that. That was the goal. And so I landed this job with the promise that I'd come in as a GM and I would take over as CEO as soon as the CEO retired. And it was a smaller company, but publicly traded still. It was a really cool industry. It was in aerospace and engineering, manufacturing, and even defense. So it was really a great little company. And I thought, this is it. I'm gonna finally get my dream. God had me go through all of that, and now I'm gonna get my dream. I was there for a year, and I was told at the end of the year that they were gonna buy my contract out, my employment contract, because the CEO had decided to stay on. And so they couldn't have two leaders.
How many times has that story been told? Goodness.
Yeah. So I was right back into job transition again. I couldn't believe it. So it was 3 months. And again, I kind of faced the same thing where I just wasn't seeing the open doors, the opportunities, but still driving towards something. Well, I decided, well, you know what? I'm going to start my own business. And and in the meantime, I'm kind of starting to build all that out, and very close to writing a check for inventory to start an industrial supply company. And I get a call from Donaldson. And I had applied to this position. I had experience in the industry years ago, that sales and product manager's role that I talked about. So I had a background in it. And they said, well, would you be interested in this? And I said, and I think I had put an application in 3 months earlier. So it was like right after I had left this other company, and I had heard zero. And I remember reading this, like, I meet every criteria plus some. They're going to call me tomorrow. Well, they don't. So 3 months goes by. And again, it's one of those things where, you know what, I'm just going to trust you, God, and I'm going to keep doing what I can do. Well, so anyway, I got set up for an interview and pretty much told, yeah, you have the job. Well, the problem here is that it was what we called a district manager's position. And it is a sales position. You manage the territory. There's some dealers you manage, but we also sell direct to end users. Well, I hadn't been an individual contributor for, 25 years or something. And so it was again, a recalibration. I was a GM on my way to be a CEO, and now I'm a sales guy. But I felt like I needed to take the job, and it was good to be a good paying job. And I thought, you know what? Maybe God wants me to change my direction. And so I went ahead and accepted. And I was in that role for 7 years. And you know what? I made more money in the 7 years than I ever did as a GM in my previous lives. I mean, it was a real blessing. And it took me 6 months to recalibrate. I'd always, in the GM role, you always have a staff, you're directing, you're delegating. Well, there was nobody to delegate to. It's just me going out there and making things happen. Wow. So it took me 6 months to kind of recalibrate. And finally, I kind of grabbed and said, yeah, this is what I'm doing. And you know what? I'm going to do the best I can at it. I'm going to be as successful as I can. And so 7 years, and then there was an opening for a regional sales director. I was approached to put an application in for that. I won the regional sales director role. I was in that for 2 years. And now there was an opening for, we went through a redesign. They changed it from a national sales director role and turned it into the sales director for the Americas, which North and South America. So I have commercial responsibility from Canada all the way to Argentina.
Wow.
So they made it kind of bigger and ended up winning that position. So it's been a great experience. I've been in that role a little over a year now.
So how many people are you responsible for?
So I think last count, there's at least 90 people that roll up into this position.
Wow.
And I have 8 direct reports.
A couple questions. So going back to when you said, when you lost your job and you were really struggling with your faith.
Yeah.
I'm guessing when you were on your knees begging, pleading, that was probably a unique time of prayer for you that you maybe didn't experience until then, at least not many times.
Yeah, that's right.
And I listened to that, and it just reminds me of what Scripture says about how God will discipline His people, and it's done usually like in Job.
Yeah,
and you're like, why? He
didn't deserve that.
I'm faithful.
Yeah.
Why am I getting this?
Right.
But looking back, you probably feel a little differently than you did in the moment.
Yeah.
On how God shaped you. And maybe strength that even strengthened your faith.
Yeah, and I think you've really hit something here. When you've been a Christian since you're 8 years old, and you've kind of technically done all the right things, church every Sunday, leading Bible studies, you start checking these boxes, and you can total that up and say, I'm doing all right. And even though you may not think it at the time, it almost feels like you just earned some favor from God.
Right.
You don't earn anything.
No,
and we don't deserve anything.
No.
And that, and I didn't even realize that about myself until I got super upset, and get mad at Him. And by the way, I think God can handle our anger. Yeah. He knows what we're feeling anyway.
Yeah.
But that changed my perspective. It doesn't matter who you are, what you've done, good or bad. God is sovereign, and He'll bring things in and out of your life as He wills. And what we're responsible to do is to react and respond and to trust Him and love Him. That's what we're supposed to do.
Obedience comes to mind as well for me. So just a quick experience for me relating to kind of what you gone through when I had my son, and when we found out he's autistic. That was one of those times where it was just walking around in the dark. Like, you don't know what's going to happen in the future, and the devil is very good at putting thoughts in your mind that will try to really break your faith.
Yeah,
because you start thinking in the future. Yeah. And you probably were thinking, oh, how am I going to pay the mortgage? How am I going to? We're going to have to sell our house. We're going to have to put them in public school, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And then
all of that.
It's like, the devil's giving you this false world, but God's saying, what are you doing? Just be obedient and I will take care of you.
Yeah.
In the moment, it might be very uncomfortable, but I got you. And that, without those experiences, how are we going to know that?
Well, that's absolutely true. And you just kind of brought something to mind here. He's going to take care of you, but it's probably not going to be in the way you have it planned out. In fact, most of the time it's not.
No.
And it's funny. You kind of see, okay, look, I think the Lord's leading this direction. And so you kind of start going, you get excited, and then the door just slams in your face and you go, what? And then it's like, taps on their shoulder. He said, no, it's there.
Yeah.
And when you turn, it's so much better.
Right.
Some of those interviews I went on that I thought I just killed it during that time. And I thought, yeah, that's where I want to work. Looking back, it would have been the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
Looking back, if I would have started my own business, it would have been the worst thing ever. It just wasn't ready for that. So God knows. He always knows. And even though we don't understand it and we have these feelings and even be upset with him and all that, in the end, it's for our good.
Yeah. Yeah. And God's providence is crystal clear when we look backwards.
Yeah.
But when we look forwards, it's very foggy.
I know. So you have to relearn those lessons over and over again.
One more question for you. How did you build your network? Because obviously in a kind of a C-suite or even a kind of a director or manager position, it's not about putting your application online or
it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work like that.
No,
That's more of kind of the entry level positions, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody's listening, what could they learn from your experience on how to get back on track and maybe start building the network so then people will notice them for a position that fits them?
Yeah, it's really, really important, and it's not that difficult. What you do is you determine what industry you have an interest in, and you just start looking for people that are in the industry that you can have coffee or have lunch with. And what I learned was that I was much more effective when I would reach out to people and not say, hey, does your company have a job opening? You don't do that. What you do is you reach out to people that are maybe in that company or in the industry. So look, I'm looking for some information. I have an interest in this industry, and I see you're a person that's been in this for a while, and I was wondering if I could buy you a cup of coffee or maybe we could meet for lunch. Would you be willing to do that? And 9 times out of 10, they would do it. And even when I was working, because the level of job I was after, I was looking for VPs and CEOs. And so it took a little bit more time to kind of get to those people, but I would go to association meetings. I would go to business luncheons or whatever, and I would start looking and asking. And so I had a target list of companies and the CEOs, and I just started trying to find, and I'll tell you this is the magic of networking though. I built a spreadsheet, and I would put the date, who I talked to, what we talked about, where we met, what their company was, what their position was. And I kept a running spreadsheet of that. And after I'd met 300 people in Kansas City over a period of time, there wasn't anybody I could meet that did not know somebody that I knew. That's all it took, 300 people.
That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people. But if you're looking for a position, it's not good. Like you said, you're not going to find a job on Monster.
Yeah.
Very few of those jobs take place. You have to increase your circle. So you start with your friends and family. Who do they know that you could just meet? And then you increase that circle, and then the job is out there on that third circle. But you have to build the bridge to that. So most of the jobs, 90% of the jobs, it's out there. They're never posted. You'll never know about them.
Wow. So would you say this is a numbers game?
On the networking part of it? Yeah, but it has to be targeted though. And you really have to, what are you after? What do you want? And see, what's kind of interesting is you have these conversations with people, and by the end of it, they kind of know you, and there's like, yeah, you know what? I think I do know of an opportunity. And then you ask them, well, who else in your industry would you suggest I talk to? But you never really ask for a job. But I'll tell you, opportunities came out of that.
So when you're having that conversation, what did that start? Like, what did that sound like? What did you start with? Did you say, hey, I'm looking for a job?
No, not at all. Never.
What did it sound like?
Because first of all, people kind of run from that.
Of course.
And second, they really don't know how to help you. I mean, they don't know you. They're not going to stick their neck out, and they have busy lives. They don't want some guy calling out of the blue asking for a job. But people always like to share about their job, their industry, what they know. So it's a very easy conversation. I'm just asking you to tell me what you know. I just want to learn. That's all I want to do. You show a little interest. It was sincere. I did want to know. And so you just start kind of building this network from there. And then monthly, I would send out a little update report, because eventually they would know that, hey, yeah, I'm looking for something. And you have your little elevator pitch about exactly what you're looking for, very specific. And every month I would send a little note, say, hey, just what did you know? I had some great interviews this month, still looking, and thank you again. I hope you're doing well. And then I'd move on. So it's just kind of this process I went through.
So start with just asking them more about what they do.
Yeah.
Tell me about your job.
Right.
Tell me what you know.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
I have a good friend. He's a programmer. He's been out of work for a while now. But I'm thinking he could apply this same strategy because it's very difficult now for programmers to find a job after the what we could call the COVID bubble burst, which everybody was staying at home. All these companies overhired because they had these, thoughts that everything was going to continue on as it was. But then things got back to normal, and they had to trim a lot of the staff. So maybe he could be doing the same thing, where he would just look for different maybe managers or just people who work at certain companies that he would maybe want to interview with, and then just ask him, hey, would you mind going having a cup of coffee?
Yeah.
I'd like to learn more about what you do.
Right.
That's great.
Now, you can't be afraid to meet strangers.
Yeah.
I mean, some people are petrified of doing that.
Right.
But unfortunately, that is what it takes. It's those relationships.
It's funny. Technology obviously is very prevalent in our culture today. It's just becoming more and more and more prevalent. But I don't think it'll ever replace what you just talked about, the importance of face-to-face human connection.
Right.
AI, VR, virtual reality, all of that still is not going to replace the face-to-face communication and connection.
Yeah, that's something I fear about our community, our country, our people, is that the more and more we get into the technology part of things, even all the social media connection, the more everybody is separated.
Yeah.
That's a sickness in our country. There's a lot of sad, lonely people.
Yep. God didn't make us to be alone.
No,
That's
absolutely
not in our DNA.
No.
And you can easily see this through studies of people who are isolated and what happens after that, right? How are you incorporating your faith in the workplace today?
Yeah, so you obviously can't actively proselytize. That's a big no-no. That's how you get fired. I will say, though, that if you live an authentic Christian life before others, you're going to be different. I mean, you just are. Even the way that your speech. How many people do you know in the workplace that don't use a tremendous amount of profanity throughout the day?
Right.
Very few, really. So just the act is I don't cuss. I just don't do it. It's never been part of my life. You don't even have to tell people that you're a Christian. It's like, after being with you for a few days, they start apologizing if they cuss. It's like, I never asked them to apologize, but they know that there's something different there, right? But if you live your life unapologetically for Jesus, you will have people come and ask you, what's up? What's different? What's going on here? And you know what? If they point blank ask me, I'm going to tell them. I'm a follower of Jesus. That's why I live the way I live. That's the reason why I work the way I work. That's the way, everything I do flows through my relationship with Jesus. At least that's what I hope to do. Let's say that.
Yeah, that's such a tricky situation. But I definitely think today people are a little too fearful, I think, and not knowing that we are protected under the First Amendment for religious freedom. Obviously, that doesn't mean we should be hiring only Christians,
right?
Because you can't do that, and you shouldn't.
No. But
I think there's a lot of people listening that are even afraid to even say what you just said.
Oh, no.
They could ask, hey, why are you like that? Well, I just don't think it's good to cuss. Oh, I get enough sleep. That's why I'm such a positive person.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Instead of saying what you said, because I think for a lot of people that's difficult.
No, we need to seize every opportunity, every natural opportunity. I think people think they need to stand on a desk and start preaching, or they have to force the issue. You don't have to force anything. Yeah. Just live a consistent, faithful life in front of others, and they will be drawn to you. I'm not saying everybody's going to talk nice about you. They might talk behind your back a little bit, but my experience has been, it's been overly positive that people have come because they know I sincerely care about them. And when they're in trouble, guess who they come to say, hey, can you pray for me? I mean, how many times, I cannot tell you how many times that I've had people come to me privately that have maybe been outwardly critical of me, maybe even tease me in front of others, but then come to me privately and ask for prayer because of some, difficult situation in their life.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
I love that. So as we wrap this up, how can our listeners get in touch with you? Maybe they need some air filtration systems for their commercial property or their factory, or maybe they just want to connect with you.
Yeah.
How can they get in touch with you?
Well, you can certainly find me on LinkedIn. I'm there. But my email address is tim.barnett, that's Barnett, at donaldson.com.
And we'll include all of his information on our website as well. Tim, thank you so much for being on the show. This was an absolute blessing to hear your story and everything that you shared.
Thank you very much for having me.